Welcome to the studio sessions at Budapest Dialogue. And with me, I have Chancellor Kurz, a very well-known figure in these parts, youngest Chancellor.
I was, yeah.
You were the
Also
youngest
getting
chancellor.
older, also getting older and older from day
So
to
are we
day.
all, Chancellor. We're all getting older. And of course, Sanjeev Sanyal, advisor to the Prime Minister and a known author, very well-known author in India. We look forward to his books all the time, read a lot of them. And we are going to be talking about bridging the divide. Now, where is the divide, first of all? Is the divide east and west, north and south? Where is it? Is there a divide? That's my first question to both of you.
If you want me to start, unfortunately, I think there is too much of divide. When I was a kid, I had the feeling as a teenager that I'm growing up in a globalized world, that the world is getting closer and closer together, and that there is more and more unity. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that we live in a totally different world today. We live in a divided world. I think because of the war in Ukraine, there's a big tension between the East and the West, and also because of the race between the US and China, there is a big divide between the East and the West. And at the same time, from my perspective, this also brings some opportunity. For example, India is a fascinating country, huge country, and a country with a lot of potential. Probably with a lot of potential to get closer to the European Union and have stronger cooperation with the EU because of the geopolitical situation that has changed in the last few years. So from my perspective, with all the negative things going on, there also come new opportunities, and probably a closer cooperation with India is one of these opportunities.
Sanjeev, your perspective, is there a divide?
I think there certainly is. I mean, the old order is clearly blowing up, literally in some cases around the world. And I think what we are going to end up with is not so much two separate blocks, which are nice and neat, like in the Cold War, but basically a series of, or rather a web of bilateral relationships. Now, in that network of bilateral relationships, there will be two centers of gravity. One is going to be China, and the other is going to be the US. And so the problem for the European Union or India and many other countries is going to be, where in that network do you place yourself? Now, as things stand, India will, of course, want to have relationships with both China and the US. But I think the way we have chosen to stay out of RCEP. We are instead pursuing free trade agreements with the European Union. We already have one with the UK. We are also negotiating one with the US. So it's quite clear that although in this web we are a separate node, we will probably be tilting westward. So in that sense, I think that's how we are negotiating this. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, let me tell you, because in the past, we have had some difficulty dealing with, particularly the European Union, for example. So I've been, working in the government for 8.5 years, and before that I was at the European Bank. And let me say that negotiating with the European Union was always a very difficult thing, because either some sort of non-tariff barrier type thing like environmental, social governance norms, CBAM, etc., would be thrown at you, and either you would be expected to bend to it, or you had to have to walk away. So, despite all of that, I would say this churn has, in fact, if anything, caused a certain amount of realism in Brussels that has allowed us to progress further down this path of free trade agreement negotiations than I would have imagined a few years ago.
Chancellor Kurz, I would put it the other way around. Negotiating with the EU, Sanjeev says, is difficult.
He's right.
No, but negotiating with India, the EU claims, and various bilateral partners claim, is far more difficult. You never seem to be able to reach an agreement. Would you agree or not?
I don't know if I could agree on that. So let's start with the European Union. I think the structure of the European Union is not easy. So there is not one center of power. Yeah, you have the Parliament, you have the Council, you have the Commission. So negotiating with the European Union, as you described it, is not easy. There's always elections somewhere. Positions sometimes change. So I think, unfortunately, the structure is how it is. Second, I think the European Union in the past always thought that it's the center of the world. The world has changed, and more and more places in the world who do not see Europe as the center of the world anymore. So I think also the European Union has to become more decent in negotiating with other countries like India. And third, I think I'm optimistic now. Why? Because of the new US administration and their very disruptive view on tariffs. I would say that probably there is now a momentum in the negotiations with India. And I think these negotiations on free trade started in 2007,
long time ago, 20 years ago.
Correct,
Yeah.
but probably there is now a new momentum because what Europe understood in the last few months, I would say, is that there is a need to have partners. And in the past, I had the impression that many European politicians liked it to travel around and lecture the world and tell everybody else that they should behave like Europeans. I think now, hopefully, there is more and more understanding that the world is diverse, that there are different systems, and that Europe should find partners and should not be left alone in the end. So from my perspective, probably there is a momentum now, and I think it would be very positive, not only for India, but mainly also for Europe.
So my follow-up question, and Sanjeev, you can start with this. Are these discussions today more transactional, or they become more realistic and less transactional? Or let me put it another way. FTA stands for free trade agreements. But a free trade agreement, to be successful, also has to be a fair trade agreement. And the dispute is that what one party thinks is fair, and the other party thinks is not fair. So where do we reach this win-win?
So the thing that he just pointed out, till recently the term fair would have been used in a peculiar way. And he said, as he pointed out, it would have been used in a sort of lecturing sort of way.
Of course.
And it's very difficult. You see, when you use, for example, the term European values to a formerly colonized country, it sounds completely different meaning. So we were talking past each other. And so I think what has happened now is that Brussels has stopped using these kinds of terms. They understand things like CBAM, don't win your friends. And I think President Trump has done everyone, at least us, a favor by tearing up the usual conversation and the usual script. So I think there is now, the conversations are real. There is an understanding that, once you have agreed on a certain set of rules, and presumably, then within those rules, free and fair mean the same thing.
So are there a certain set of rules we are agreeing on at this point of time?
Yes, we are in fairly advanced conversations.
And what are those?
I'm not in a position to divulge that, but you have seen Commerce Minister stating that we are making progress, and that is not just true with the European Union. We are making good progress even with the US, and of course we already have free trade agreements with places like Australia, Japan, UAE, and of course the UK.
So, Chancellor Kurz, are we today in a position where the negotiating parties are in a better position, a clearer position to understand each other's compulsions, to start to sit down and sort each other's issues with regard to trade?
I hope so. I think there's a big chance now that there's an understanding in the European Union. There are some new players like Chancellor Merz in Germany who is doing a great job, and others. I think there's a chance for a better understanding for the rest of the world. And I think this behavior of traveling around and lecturing everybody, this is something that has to stop, and I hope it's going to stop. So from my perspective, if you look at Europe, if you look at the economic growth rates, if you look at the fact that we are an aging society, India is an incredible important partner for Europe, and especially the fact that you have so much talent, the fact that India has such a young society, but also if you look at areas like AI, where India is one of the leading countries in the world, I think there's a lot of room for cooperation. And from my perspective, the EU has difficulties, of course, understandably, with Russia at the moment. There are huge tensions. At the same time, the relationship with China is not easy. The EU itself described China as a partner, economic competitor and rival at the same time. So not an easy relationship, as you can imagine, describing such a relationship yourself with these worlds. And also with the US, I would say the relationship has been much easier in the past for most European countries. So from my perspective, there's a good momentum now, and we should use it.
So see, trade is one part of the discussions, but underlying all the trade negotiations, there are deeper concerns. You mentioned technology, you mentioned artificial intelligence. I can add mutual security concerns, which include economic security. And you mentioned the war in Ukraine, and we saw the war in Ukraine really make it was a European security problem, but it made countries of the global south extremely worried, because what got affected were flows of energy, flows of fertilizer, flows of food, fundamental issues to do with their economic security. And that is why the South starts getting concerned that if there is going to be no peace in Europe, there is going to be major concerns for the rest of the world. So do these negotiations somewhere head us in that direction, help us to remove these mutual insecurities?
Look, I think, first of all, the war in Ukraine showed us that peace is not a given. And unfortunately, I think there is no easy answer or easy solution for that war. But I hope that in the end, there will be negotiations and then a good outcome for Ukraine. So in order that it's possible to stop the war, or at least reach a ceasefire. That this war is affecting also other countries, this is also clear, but I think it also shows us that it's important to have partners, that it's important to have partners also outside of Europe. And regarding security, from my perspective, there's a lot that could be done in common or together. If you look at the fight against terror or radical Islamists, that is something that has become a big issue in Europe. And at the same time, it's something where India has similar interests. So if you look, for example, on cyber threats, cybersecurity, I think this is something where there's a lot of potential to cooperate. Also in other areas, I think that India is a natural, strong potential partner for Europe.
Sanjeev, your take.
So I think in this case, it's a question of trust and building long-term trust. And India is a very old civilization, and we think of friendship in a somewhat different way, which is that you stand by your friends even if sometimes they do things which you may not approve of. And you saw that in our behavior vis-a-vis Russia. We aren't very pleased about the fact that there's a war going on in Eastern Europe, but we did not abandon them. But that same level of trust will also prove to be useful to other parts of the world. If Europe sees and we build up a relationship of friendship with Europe, that would also apply to them. So I think the important thing is that there is trust, a long-term relationship, and this is not a transactional one. So therefore, this is where this business of fair trade and free trade have to basically mean the same thing within the rules, of course, of agreement. But within that, it has to be the same thing, because that's based on the idea of trust. And Same thing is, by the way, true on the other side of the pond. You cannot have Canada, for example, hosting terrorists on their soil and using state power to protect them. We also have interests, and we may not be pleased if Canada does that. From our perspective, Canada is a terrorist supporting country like Pakistan.
Just of course. Your tenure, you saw a lot of major developments happening, and you spearheaded them on issues related to migration, movement of labor and capital. You spearheaded many of those. What I would ask you is, and both of you, to resolve problems which concern with the flow of labor and migration, is there not a partnership between the East and the West and the North and the South which can help resolve these problems? And these cannot be seen as a zero-sum game. I would even dare say that the problems of the North, the problems of the West, are actually going to be resolved by solutions in the East. Is that correct?
I would agree on some parts. So first of all, I think partnership is always good, and of course there's a need of working together to fight illegal migration between the West and the East and the North and the South. I disagree that only by solving the problems of the South, for example, you can stop illegal migration. From my perspective, it's important to support the South. It's important to solve issues that are still there, but that alone will not solve the problem of illegal migration in Europe. So from my perspective, the migration system is not functioning. It's a huge mess in the European Union, and it's mainly the fault of the European Union and our own legislation. So the system is just not working, and it's not just because of problems in the South for people who have to leave. There are hundreds of millions of people who would see it very attractive to come to the European Union if you allow them to come illegally. If you don't have ways to send them back immediately, if you give people the chance to decide on their own in which country to apply for asylum, that they do it in countries with the highest social standards, so that in the end, many countries in the EU have no asylum seekers at all, and some like Austria, Germany, Sweden have huge numbers. So this is not something that somebody else can solve. It's not something India can solve. It's not something that could be solved in Africa or elsewhere. It's a problem created within the European Union. It's a system that is not functioning at all. And I think it's the duty of the European Union to get this under control. Second, on migration, I think, because you mentioned flow of labor, what we see at the moment is not the flow of labor. I spent 1 week a month in Abu Dhabi since I left politics, and I can tell you it's a very international place. You have people from all around the world, and you see a lot of hardworking people contributing to the society there. In our case, if you look at Europe, most of the people who are coming are illegal or have a refugee status. Many of them are not able to contribute to our societies. Many of them do not have a chance to find a job at all. And of course, there's a high number of people creating trouble. So from my perspective, we have to distinguish between the problems we are facing in the EU, mainly related to illegal migration, and the question like the flow of labor, which is a totally different story. For example, I think you in India, you have one of the 20% of the AI talent worldwide is in India. So I think every country in the world is happy to get AI talents to work in these countries and to contribute. But that's not what we are talking about in the EU at the moment.
Sanjeev?
Well, I'm not interested.
Closing comments.
I'm not really interested in the movement of labor. I'm much more interested in the movement of jobs to India. So, we want our best talent to stay back in India, to make those jobs and to trade. So rather than Indians moving, even legally, to the European Union, we would much rather that we build up our own capabilities in our own hubs and that those jobs move to us. So in fact, in some ways, this trade deal, if it is fair and free, would in fact allow some of this to happen without the need for large numbers of people to be sucked into the European Union, where it is difficult to assimilate them. In any case, when you're leading with such large numbers of people, picking and choosing is almost impossible, and you lose control of it. So we are in some sense offering a solution, but let us, we Indians are happy to live in India. Yeah. We want a system that allows us to do those jobs while living at home. And, whether it's AI or whatever it is, and we'll come and visit you in summer when it's hot in Delhi and have a nice vacation here. No, and we would like Budapest to be a nice, safe place for us to have holidays.
And I think you always have to distinguish. You always have to distinguish between talents who want to contribute somewhere, and pay taxes, probably start businesses, create jobs, also want to live in a secure place. And illegal flow of migration that is very problematic for countries and societies.
So that's a perfect place to end this. That is precisely the point we're trying to make, is that we can resolve each other's problems through these agreements.
No, absolutely.
And reach a situation where we find the solutions to problems which both of us have. So thank you, both of you, for that great discussion at the Budapest Global Dialogue. It was a pleasure having both of you, and I hope our audience has enjoyed this as much as I have talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.